are you? And where are you going? What do you want?
Hello and welcome to People Making Money. I'm your host, Kevin Bemmel, and I'm here every Wednesday at 10 a.m. Pacific time to talk about job hunting, starting and running a business, and building wealth. So the whole financial side of our lives. So today is our monthly Economic Echoes show, where we talk about the economic data that's been published between shows. Usually it's a lagging process. So the data that's been published for September of 2025. And we talk about how that might impact us as individuals. I don't think I've said this the last couple of shows, but of course, none of us lives the national economy. So it's largely irrelevant to us if national inflation is, let's say, I think it's around 2.8, 2.9%, or 2.4%, whatever it is. Number one, we don't live everywhere in the country. We only live in the location in which we live. Number two, we don't buy the exact basket of goods on which the consumer price index, which is how we typically track inflation, is based. And so depending on our lifestyle and that of our family, that is going to affect how we experience, in this example, inflation. So this month's Economic Echoes is going to be a little bit different because, as hopefully you know, the government has been shut down now for about 3 weeks. As of today, I heard on the business reporting this morning that we're into our 4th week, and one of the government functions that's shut down is the reporting by the Department of Labor on various statistics, including the Consumer Price Index and various labor and job statistics. So we don't really know what inflation was last month, although experientially, it doesn't seem to me to be any much different than it's been for the last six months anyway, maybe 12 months. And so how you're feeling in terms of the affordability of your life, well, that's probably as good a gauge of inflation in any event anyway, as knowing what the consumer price index is. So I'm going to look around for some sort of private data source for price changes, something that is hopefully reported on a monthly basis. I haven't heard of anything, so I'm not exactly sure where to find it, but stay tuned and we'll see next month if I'm able to dig anything up. But with regard to employment statistics, so what a lot of people are using in lieu of Labor Department statistics is the ADP report. And let me go ahead and bring that up. And we'll make sure to enlarge the screen here so you can see it better. Okay, so here we go. All right, so let me just sort of scroll up here so you can see about what I'm talking. So ADP does a national employment report, and you can see it's in collaboration with Stanford Digital Economy Labs. So it's not just ADP doing this. They have some academics involved. And why would ADP do this? Well, ADP is far and away the largest payroll service supplier in the country, I assume in the world, and so they are able to. They have access to, I should say, a tremendous amount of information on employment trends. And what they do, I suspect, is they take the information from that they gather on all of their customers. They anatomize it. In other words, they make it they make it anonymous. An anatizement, I think, is the right word. Anyway, they make the data anonymous. They aggregate it, so they're not disclosing any private data of any client, and then they use it to create this national employment report. So, as you can see here, as of September 25, 2025, the change in US private employment, it went down 32,000 jobs. Okay, we'll look at there is some granulation down below that we'll take a look at. So private employers shed 32,000 jobs in September. 80, and you can see here, ADP conducted its annual preliminary re-benchmarking of the National Employment Report in September, and based on the full year 2024 results of the quarterly census of employment wages, say this resulted in a reduction of 43,000 jobs compared to pre-benchmarked data. Now, I want to talk about this whole issue of data and benchmarking and such. So the fact of the matter is, and if you listen to the economist for UBS who does their morning reports, he's quite droll when he talks about the data that's available to us. He frequently makes rather snarky remarks about the lack of reliability in the data. And part of that reason is because the way the Labor Department compiles its data is it sends out requests for surveys to employers and it asks them to fill them out. And then it takes that information and it compiles it into the monthly and annual reports. The problem is, over the last, I don't know what time period, at least a decade, maybe longer, fewer and fewer employers are taking the time to fill out those surveys. And so the reliability of the Labor Department's information has been declining for quite some time now. And we want to think that the information that the government generates is accurate, but the reality is it's only as good as the data that it's able to collect. And as my father taught me as a young boy, when talking about computers, which were in kind of their nascency back then, he used to say GIGO or GIGO, garbage in, garbage out. And so as the amount and quality of the data that the Labor Department is able to obtain declines, so does the reliability of their reports. And so there's been quite a bit of talk in the business media of late over private alternatives, and you will hear people sort of poo-pooing the ADP report, which is, I think, largely considered to be the best alternative. I would say that when it comes to data collection, so ADP has available to it a tremendous amount of data on employment. Now, I can't tell you how much, how many businesses they have versus how many businesses typically respond to the Labor Department survey. But what I can tell you is, ADP has a lot of data available. And at this point, it's the best that we've got. And in fact, this is me, the contrarian side of me. I'm always a little bit skeptical when people who self-label as experts, start poo-pooing some, all collectively poo-poo, a data source. It tends to indicate to me that maybe it's a better data source than they want us to think, and there are other reasons why they're putting it down. So certainly Dr. Richardson here, who's the chief economist at ADP, I suspect she would dispute the contention that the ADP report is not reliable. So we'll see. I'm hopeful that once the government reopens and the Labor Department starts publishing data, that somebody will do a study to determine the relative reliability of Labor Department statistics versus ADP's data, and we'll get some greater clarity on that. So here is the change in private employment in the United States. You can see the graph starts here around January 2010. There were roughly 107 million people employed. Here we are roughly 15 years later, and there are 134 million, roughly 500 people employed. So you can see there's been a pretty steady upward trend. Of course, this is COVID when we had that sharp drop, but we've recovered all the jobs lost during COVID and have gone beyond that. Now you can see that the number 134,526 is as of September. If we go to August, you can see 135,558. That's that 32,000 job private employment decline that they mentioned in their headline. Okay, so now let's look at industries. So you can see construction, leisure and hospitality, professional business service, education and health services, manufacturing, trades, transportation, financial, information and other. Okay, so those are the various sectors. Now, one of the things, if you recall from previous months' episodes of this show, is education and health. You'll notice, number one, there's one sector that's missing, and that is government employment, because of course ADP does not do any government employment, but also it's really government spending that oftentimes drives education and especially health services. Okay, so that may be kind of a proxy for that. So if we look at September, we can see, for example, as has typically been the case, education and health services, largest sector, professional and business services next, leisure, hospitality, manufacturing, financial services, construction, other services, information, and then natural resources and mining. So, and if we just, beep down here from, that's July. Let's get, okay, here's August. Here's August. So education, health services, 25,673. This month, 25,706. So they've gone up. Okay. Professional and business services, 22,660. Declined slight, 13,000 jobs. That's about a third of the drop right there. Okay. Leisure and hospitality, last month, August, 17,631. And this month, or September, I should say, 17,612. So you can see there's about a 20,000, 19,000 jobs, jobs lost there. So between business and professional services and leisure and hospitality, you're seeing there's that's a big part of the drop. Okay, manufacturing went from 12,799 to 12,797, so it dropped slightly, but essentially unchanged. Okay, financial activities, 8,966, 8,957, again dropped slightly. Construction, 8,367, 8,362, another small drop. Other services, 4,826,000 dropped 16,000, a larger drop for other services. Information went up 3,000, and natural resources and mining dropped 4,000. Okay, so what we're seeing here is gains in education and health services essentially partially offset drops in pretty much every other sector except for information services. I'm just going to try something here. Yeah, there we go. So you can see now, let me get it to there. Okay. So you can see the employment picture for 2025 in general. We'll start here in January. Okay, so education 25,795,000. Okay, and they're at 25,706. So you can see that overall they've dropped roughly about 89,000 jobs. Okay, so let's look at professional and business services. Started the year 22,653. They're at 22,647. They've dropped slightly, so far this year. Okay, so you can see that, you can see just looking at the lines, most of the private sector employment trends are pretty flat for 2025. Okay, and that's, by the way, that's one of the things that motivated the Federal Reserve to drop interest rates 0.25% last month, or earlier this month, actually, I believe. Employment growth has stalled so far this year, and so they're looking to potentially boost the economy a little bit. Okay, so looking at changes in size change in employment by the size of the company. So you can see right now the driver of job growth is large employers, 500 employees or more. They gained 33,000 jobs. All the others dropped jobs. So again, we're seeing large companies, partially offset employment losses at smaller companies. Okay, and the losses you can see the biggest losses were in the smallest companies, and then the losses were not as large for mid-sized companies. And then, there were gains for the largest companies. Okay, so one would imagine that people are gravitating from smaller employers to larger employers. Now, if what does this mean for us as individuals? Well, I fit into this category over here. So, and by the way, most of my competitors are in this category as well. So while this, of course, is a national number, for those of us who are very, very small companies or solo companies, right? People evidently are struggling. So if you're in this category and you're feeling like you're struggling, or even in this category, 20 to 49 employees, that is generally the case. Now, the interesting question is, why are businesses in the small and mid-sized categories struggling? It could be, for example, because of the tariffs, whereas larger companies are able to absorb them better. Smaller companies don't have the ability to do that. It could be that they are being enticed by larger companies to take jobs there. I know I pretty routinely get solicitations from recruiters to see if I'm interested in potentially, working for another company. So, maybe people are looking at the kind of volatility in the economy right now, and they're opting to go to work for a larger employer because they feel that will give them greater stability. I'm not a believer in that. I always have looked at it that if I work for someone else, I essentially have one client, and that client gets to decide the entire state of my economy, right? Because if they want to retain me, great, I'm getting paid. And if they want to let me go, my income drops down to zero. So that's why, with the exception of being in the United States Navy, throughout my profession, almost my entire professional life, otherwise, I've worked for myself, because that way I can have multiple clients. If I lose one, okay, I lost a part of my income, but I didn't lose it all. Okay, changes by industry. So in goods, we saw natural resources and mining, interestingly, went up 4,000. Okay, construction and manufacturing went down 5 and 2,000 each. So services, you can see education and health services went up 33,000, as did information. We mentioned that a minute ago. Trade and transportation, utilities, financial activities, business or professional services all went down. Okay, as did leisure and hospitality and other services. Okay, so that gives us somewhat of a picture. Oh, and here we can look at you can see um, that what's happened based on the size of an establishment. Let's take this down to 2025, just 2025, like we did the other. And you can see again, you can see the employment picture overall based on establishment size has also been pretty flat. That would seem to be the case. Okay, and let's look at region. Okay, so um, a and let's take it down to 2025. Oops, a little bit too far here. Okay. So you can see even regionally, not much variation. So no particular part of the country is being more adversely affected or is doing better than any other particular part. Okay. So uh, you know, overall a pretty flat employment picture. If you're in the South Atlantic, which interestingly enough has the largest number of employees at almost 27 million. Okay, that's essentially they were at about they've actually increased a little bit from 26,546,000 in January to 26 million. I don't know why it doesn't want to go to September. Okay, well, to 26,636,000 in August. And again, I'm not sure why it doesn't want to go to September, but let's see if it'll go out. Okay, here we go. Here's September for some reason. Okay, so it went from 26.4 646. Actually, I take that back. They lost about 5,000 jobs so far this year in the South Atlantic. In the Pacific, which is the next biggest sector, 21,237. They're at 21,262. So they've gone up in the Pacific area. North Central, 19,396 and they're at 19,488. So East North Central has increased. Mid Atlantic, 17,464 is now at 17,570. So they've also increased. Okay. West South Central, 16,228. They've lost 100,000 jobs in the West South Central, down to 16,118. Mountain area, 10,165. They're now at 10,184, gone up a little bit. West North Central, okay, they started at 9,193. They're now at 9,207, went up a little bit. East South Central started the year at about 7,275. They're now at 7,414. So they've gone up almost 150,000 jobs. And then finally, New England started at 6,551 and it's at 6,550. So it's declined just a bit. So we've seen 3 regions decline. Others have seen actually, not too bad job growth so far this year. So maybe we've seen a couple 100,000, 250,000 jobs so far this year. That's not a lot, by the way, but overall we have seen slight job growth so far this year. Okay, so that is the employment picture. I spent a little bit more time with that than I usually do, just to sort of give you an idea of what other data is out there. Okay, so now let's look at housing. Okay, so as we typically do, we start with California. So the median sales price as of September was up 2% year over year. Number of houses sold went up over 9% year over year. Okay, so those both look good, but interestingly enough, median days on market also went up 11% year over year. So the market is still strong. It's just taking longer to get the price that people want. Okay, and so looking at the 1 year price trends, you can see in that it started here just above 800,000, and now it's a little bit higher than it was a year ago. 2% higher, so year over year, right? So that, and you can see it's been hovering in this zone for all of the last year. We're not seeing dramatic changes. Okay. Metro areas with the fastest growing sale prices, Banning, interestingly enough, probably because prices are so low, but Santa Monica close behind, El Dorado Hills, Chino, Palo Alto, Redondo Beach, Berkeley, Rancho Palos Verdes, otherwise known as RPV, etc., and Camarillo. So still there are areas that are seeing very high sales growth. Okay, housing supply, okay, was up almost 11% year over year. Let's look at the 1 year. So you can see that it's been trending higher. Okay, for most of the year. Okay, the number of newly listed homes, though, has decreased almost 5% year over year, and the month supply is basically unchanged year over year. So one of the reasons why I think we're seeing prices continuing to increase is in California is the number of homes available for sale has shrunk. I'm sorry, the number of homes available for sale has gone up, but the trend is down for newly listed homes. Okay, so that is having, it looks like, the impact of longer days on market, and kind of moderating overall the kind of price increases. So overall, California saw only 2%, whereas you can see there are areas where it's much, much higher than that. Okay, and then finally, homes sold above list price, 33%, down almost 8% year over year. Homes sold with a price drop, almost 27%, up almost 3.5%. And sale to list price, 99.4%, down 0.75%. Okay, so so again, the trend to see homes selling above list price is declining. People, sellers are being forced to negotiate. Okay, here's the 10 most competitive markets. You see there, and it's some of the same ones that saw big price increases. And here's the map. I think that's always interesting to look at. U.S. migration trends. Where are they moving from? California, Illinois, New York, California and New York highest, Illinois next, and then other states, Washington, interestingly enough, North Dakota probably because of the cold, Nebraska, Utah, New Mexico, Georgia, and then some states in the Northeast. It's and mid Atlantic. Sorry, where are they going to? Mostly Florida. Okay, and then Arizona, North Carolina, South Carolina, Tennessee, Maine is up there, and then you can see that for states that are in this sort of, I don't know what kind of khaki color, the number of people moving in and moving out are about the same. So there's net in migration to Idaho, to North Carolina, to South Carolina, to Tennessee, Florida, 26,000 people. Okay. California lost 42,000 people. New York, 31,000. Illinois, 24,000. Pennsylvania lost three. Virginia lost 5. Maryland lost 10. Connecticut 5. Massachusetts 8. And Rhode Island 3. Nebraska, okay, that's interesting. Nebraska, they've got it colored blue, but it's actually should be this sort of khaki color. Same with North Dakota. Washington lost 9,000. Utah also should not be blue. It should be the khaki color, and New Mexico as well. So it's interesting. These 4 states here are colored wrong for some reason. Yeah, Louisiana lost 1,000. Okay, but most of the rest of the states they're holding their population. So what we're seeing is people moving from Washington, California, Illinois, New York, the 3 New England states, Pennsylvania, Maryland, and Virginia, and they're moving to Florida, the Carolinas, Tennessee, and Arizona primarily. And some are going to Maine, and some are going to Michigan. Okay, so those are the trends. Where are people moving from? Los Angeles tops it. I can understand why. New York, Washington, D.C., San Francisco, Seattle, Chicago. Notice that these are all large cities, right? And where are they going to? Well, Sacramento continues to be kind of an outlier. I suspect a lot of the people leaving places like San Francisco and Los Angeles are moving to Sacramento because it is a smaller city. But other than that, they're moving primarily to smaller cities, Phoenix being perhaps the largest among these small cities. Okay. So, and you can see, by the way, the out migration is not anything close to the in migration. So a lot of people are moving to smaller cities than even these, I suspect. Okay, so that is the housing picture, and these links will all be in the show notes as always, and you can look up whichever location you want. So we'll do Florida here. Okay, so here's the Florida market. You can look at all the same data. Okay, here's this same map. Okay, so this will be the same on no matter where you search it. Okay, but it'll give you all the same data. So if you're trying to figure out, do I want to stay where I'm at? Do I want to move? Okay, and I think you can even, so you can drill down into, in this case, we're looking at the Los Angeles market. Okay, and you can look at individual cities as well. Okay, and you get this, how hot is the market? Okay, so this is a great tool for understanding your specific situation with respect to housing. Okay, now let's look at rents. Here we go. Sorry, it took me a second there. Okay, so looking at the rental market. Yeah. Okay, so this is done by Zillow Rentals, and you see here the median rents in selected markets, and you can click through to these. Look at Los Angeles. Okay, month over month change, $25, year over year change, $30 down. Okay, not real big changes in the average rent. You can get an idea of rental price ranges. You can see that, most of them are starting around 1,500, 1,600. The rental market is warm. Okay. And you can do a comparison search. So Los Angeles versus, let's look at Omaha. Oops. Omaha, Nebraska, right? So the average rent in Los Angeles is almost $1,200 higher than in Omaha. Okay, here's trend. You can find trends in your in specific areas within Los Angeles. You can drill down to those areas. Okay, so Culver City, the average rent is almost $3,300. Okay, it's down $105 month over month, but still up $145. And one of the things I live not too far from Culver City. A lot of construction going on there. New construction, generally speaking, will push rents up because in order to justify building, rents have to justify the cost to invest in new housing. Okay, so you can look at specific city markets and get an idea of again how is the market in which you're doing. And by the way, you can look at size of apartments here. Okay, so looking at just 2-bedroom apartments, down $40 month over month, but up over $100 year over year, right? As opposed to 1-bedroom apartments, okay, which are much less expensive, and they are up $25 month over month, but down $125 year over year, right? So, you can look at these different aspects. See, 3-bedroom apartments up month over month and year over year. So you can really drill down and get the kind of data that you need to assess your specific situation. Okay, so that's that. In terms of rentals. So let's look at. Let's see. Choose another. Here we go. So let's look at another area. Let's look at maybe where people are going. Orlando. Let's look at Orlando. Oops. I'll learn to spell soon, I promise. Orlando, Florida. Okay, so here's Orlando, Florida. The rental market is cooling there. It's down month over month and year over year. You can see, in contrast to Los Angeles, the bulk of apartments are between 1,300 and maybe 2,700, whereas the average rent in Los Angeles is $2,700. Much more affordable in Orlando, which is, of course, why people are moving there. Okay, but its market temperature is still warm. Okay, so here we can do a direct comparison. All right, there you go. So you can see almost $800, or actually, $800 a month higher in Los Angeles. Okay, and these are different parts of different parts of Orlando to get a sense of. So Conway, Florida, obviously the sort of Beverly Hills of the Orlando area. The other areas are more modest. Okay, so you can search rentals here and really see, hey, what might I want to do about my living situation, if anything. Okay, and then as always, the last thing we're going to look at is the consumer sentiment survey that's done by the University of Michigan. Okay, and you can see here that it's essentially unchanged September to October. 55 now was at 55.1, down 0.2%, but that's still a big drop from a year earlier of 22%. So the volatility in the economy is causing people to be much less certain about it. Okay. Current economic conditions improved a little bit from the previous month, but they're still down 6% year over year. Index of consumer expectations is down 31% year over year, even though they're down only slightly month over month. Okay, so you can see that nationwide, which is how this report is done, where people are still not as optimistic as they were a year ago. Things like the year ahead inflation expectations dropped slightly from 4.7% to 4.6% this month, but long-range inflation expectations held steady at 3.7%. So people are expecting inflation to go up, and that's not so surprising because that's what people are hearing in the media, that inflation is going to go up. So, in reality, inflation has been pretty steady in the sort of mid to slightly below, a little bit above now for quite some time. So the reality of inflation and how it's being reported, I think, are a little bit different. So, hopefully what we'll see going forward is the trade issues with China worked out. That's really kind of the last big one in terms of potential tariffs and all of that. Although there is some uncertainty about tariffs because there is a case pending before the court still that could take away from President Trump the ability to unilaterally impose tariffs, at least based on the emergency powers that he's using, or the threat to America powers that he's using. However, if that happens, there are still other authorities that the president can use to impose tariffs. And one would imagine that the White House is looking at those issues now. And so if the court overturns the use of tariffs under the current authorities, they will immediately turn around and impose them under different authorities. And then, perhaps the whole legal process, the legal challenging process will start all over again. So, I think that at least for the balance of this year, we are going to continue to see volatility, or not volatility, uncertainty in the economy. But I think little by little, certain parts of it are going to calm down. Hopefully, we will continue to see at least a relatively stable employment picture. I don't see any reasons coming up why that would change significantly, either to the bad or to the good. I think it's just going to kind of be what it's going to be. And so, we, I think the deregulation agenda of the current administration will continue. That should presumably create more opportunity for business creation, which should create some opportunity for job growth. So, again, the question always is, what does this mean for us? So here's the reality. It's always a great time to start a business, for example, and it's never an appropriate time to start a business, right? That is the reality of the economy. So whether, if you're waiting for the right economic times to start a business, okay, I think that's largely a fool's game, with due respect. So some of the largest companies in the world were started during the Great Depression, right? The worst economic times we've had, in the last century. Okay, and so the reality is the larger economy is, to a certain extent, irrelevant to the success or failure of a business. What's relevant to the success or failure of a business is, do you have the skills and the tenacity to make the business successful? Is what you're doing something that is wanted or needed? I should say needed or wanted by customers and clients? Are you able to? So those are largely unaffected by the national economy. Although people being able to afford your business can have some impact. Okay. But if you're providing a need, so then as long as you are priced within the market, so then you're not going to be beaten out by competitors. People need what it is you're doing or selling. And so they're going to come to you. Now, if you're dealing with wants, those will be, of course, more price sensitive. And so then how people feel about the economy, uh, what job prospects look like, all of those will have more of an impact than if you have a needs-based business, right? So I'll take my business as an example. My business is a needs-based business because people, they die. That's the reality of life, right? People die. And unfortunately, people too often die without any kind of estate plan. And so then it becomes a big mess. Heirs start arguing, fighting, and courts will, especially here in California, will recommend that a professional be brought in who can be neutral and get the administration of the estate moving, and at least somewhat quell the fighting. So these are the kinds of uh, issues I encourage you to think about against the backdrop of the economic data that I talk about on my on the economic echoes uh, uh, episodes, because together they will give you as clear a picture as you're probably going to be able to get about whether you should change your job hunting posture, whether you should start a business, what you should do about running your business, right? These are crucial questions. Okay. So that's what I have for you today. I thank you very much for joining me, and especially live viewers. Always a treat to know you're there. And tomorrow at 5 p.m. Pacific time is my show, Jiggers' Place. We'll have a cocktail and a schmooze. And then we'll pick it up again next week on Monday at 10 a.m. Pacific with Trusts and Estates Weekly, Tuesday at 10 a.m. Pacific, Business Lessons from the Military. And then we'll be back a week from today for the next edition of People Making Money. So once again, thank you so much for joining me. Wishing you a wonderful rest of the day. Signing off as I always do. Marie, darling, you are my belle.